very first discussion on the work session is the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development Operating Assistance Grant. Can we get, I know there's going to be some questions, so I know the person who can probably answer them the best is Mr. Greg Murray. Greg, you want to, Mr. Brett Wilson? Doesn't matter.
A seat as well.
That's fine, wherever you want.
Yeah, I'll be glad to answer any questions about it. I can tell you that a scope of work, which is obviously vital to any type of grant, is en route, being produced at by the Secretary Holt, Secretary of Housing and Community Development. That will shed more light on the purpose of the grant, but I think it's been explained generally that the Secretary in his visit here and his commitment to helping with the city and the downtown urban improvement program has also been interested in basically funding a person local to the community who will help to oversee from the state side the state monies that DHCD puts into the project or into the city, and not just the city, but programs throughout the county to make better coordination with local communities so that we make sure the money is timely and goes to the right places, and that the monies that are available are requested. So until we get the actual scope of work, it's hard to be more detailed about it, but that's the goal of the grant. And you know, I certainly hope the council will look favorably on. I know they had used or would like to work through the city of Hagerstown, particularly because you are a Main Street community. I mean, you're committed to the redevelopment of your downtown. DHCD under Secretary Holt's leadership has really kind of just built on what they did before and changed their program a little bit because they understand that housing can be helped directly and can be helped indirectly by building up a stronger economic base as well. So this is just my understanding is this is a further effort on the Secretary's part to coordinate what monies can be given through grants to the city and other communities in the area, that they're there as efficiently as possible.
You know, I can only tell you that it would definitely benefit the city of Hagerstown when it comes to the current projects that are currently in place and moving forward, but future projects as such as student housing and things like that we're focused on in the core of the city of Hagerstown in particular. I know I could have used someone that I could contact directly because I was dealing with some issues at the Hamilton Hotel, and that had to go through a couple people to get some answers and things like that. So it would have been great to have an individual that I could just refer to and have them, you know, again, another project where DHCD is putting money into it. So.
Right, and that's the hope, that it makes things more smooth for local jurisdictions. And again, because Hagerstown's taken the lead on becoming a Main Street community and really devoting significant efforts to the redevelopment of its downtown, its core, and its outlying areas, that the Secretary wants to try this and see if it helps further all the projects along.
Sure. Cool. Any questions from the council for Brett that Mr. Wilson can answer for us?
I'd just like to thank the delegate and the state for all the work you've done on this project, Brett. I know we have a number of partners, and without any one of those partners, this project couldn't happen, and without you, this project wouldn't happen. So thank you.
Thanks, but honestly, it started with the city, with the initial funding of the plans for the Maryland Theater expansion. That all started with your grant to them. So without that getting the ball rolling, quite frankly, the rest probably doesn't move along as quickly as it has. So it is a partnership thing, and I'd say no one entity deserves more thanks than another, but you guys got it started. So,
and Greg needs to be thanked very much. I think we all acknowledge that without his leadership, this project would have never gotten off first base.
That's correct.
That includes our contribution to the Maryland Theater would have never occurred. So, I mean, he's the man who really made it happen.
He's coordinated quite a bit on this. That's absolutely correct.
Anybody else?
I'd like to echo Councilmember Messner's comments as well. Appreciate the support from the state and the local delegation, and it's great to hear that the with this project going forward, that it has spurred some additional interest in the possibilities for additional projects going forward. So, thank you.
So I have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. The first comment I'll make is I'm obviously familiar with Mr. Murray. We have and have been both personal and professionally friends for some time. I was one of the commissioners that was fortunate enough at that time to hire Mr. Murray as the county administrator. And if I were still commissioner, I would have certainly allowed for him to determine when that time of departure. That's me speaking to Mr. Murray on a direct and personal level of the intellect and integrity that I think that he possesses, and certainly could resonate for this type of process. And so I thank him for his continued interest in downtown and seeing these projects through. And certainly the state for recognizing an important sort of cog in that wheel. My question, I think, though, speaks more directly to process. And I think that our staff probably have some of this same question in mind from the city's perspective. Obviously, one of the obvious questions is, what's the necessity to utilize the city as the pass-through entity for this purpose if the intent is for the state to have sort of direct, eyes on these things at their base level?
My understanding, again, having not spoken directly to Secretary Holt recently, my understanding is the goal is to link in with the local community. This is a Main Streets community. It's something that needs to be highlighted, and I think his hope is that by utilizing the city for this grant as well, it gets a better buy-in to our city and our projects.
Okay. So, and again, I'm just trying to understand. So in this process, is it generally understood that DHCD needs to use a local pass-through as part of Main Street or whatever format or framework it's taking to do this, or could it accomplish that in a more direct manner, i.e. not using the city as a pass-through?
Well, and I think that's more for the professionals at DHCD, Carol Gilbert in particular. This is how they have proposed to do it at this time, but that's certainly a question we can get answered, Councilman, without a problem.
Okay. All right. The second question that I have is typically when we see these grant applications and processes to the state, they're obviously typically filed directly from the city. This is obviously a little different, and I realize the city has to sign off on it. So I guess once these wheels are put in motion, how will that line of communication occur? In other words, we have for lack of a better term, sort of an order of staff,
Right.
At the city. We similar to when we used the Urban Partners. They're a consultant. They developed a plan, and then they process that through a specific city department or a specific city process. I'd like a better understanding of how that process occurs in this particular case. In other words, will the consultant be reporting back directly to the state, or does it go through a specific city department or a mayor and council? I'm just trying to understand.
Well, I think you're overthinking it, quite frankly, because this is more like the nature of an ombudsman who will be there to help, again, be a conduit from state to city officials to help them do their job, make sure that they have all the tools necessary, the grants necessary, to get these things done as efficiently as possible. Sometimes the state's kind of large, and sometimes it's more difficult to reach the person or the entity that you're trying to get to. This localizes that, so we have that first contact. I don't think there's any magic to it, honestly, Councilman. I think it really is just someone who is there to have be the one who's responsible then getting back to the state
Okay.
when issues arise, to make sure that those are cleaned up as quickly as
I
possible.
would definitely expect that ombudsman would be in direct communication with our Community Economic Development Department.
Absolutely.
So sort of like Josh Russin, I don't know if folks remember him from the governor's office at one time, or I forget Chris's last name, something like that, where we'll have that sort of state-oriented direct line of communication
That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah.
to basically the governor's cabinet of folks.
Yeah, and this time it'll be direct to DHCD for the monies that, for any grants or monies that they are in the process of delivering for city or local communities.
And in this process, will it be limited to, because in the application it identifies sort of three, what I would call more specific areas. You got the UIP, wish it would have a better name than that by this time.
Call it the dip, man.
Yeah, that was like the only downfall you had was not coming up with a better name for it, Greg. And then the housing and then the retail, and there's all these three things. I guess my curiosity is, will it be limited to the downtown? Will it be limited to sort of those specific goals, or will that conduit be available in a broader scale? Because one of the things we get, I think, as mayor and council from time to time are folks that may feel that we, the state, the county, government in general, are too focused, on that specific locale, that specific set of goals and parameters.
Yeah, and you're right, I've heard those remarks too, and I think you're very wise to be sensitive to them. Again, the scope of work is being prepared and will be sent out when it's ready, but my understanding is that it's to be beyond just the downtown project. That is to help the local community generally, meaning Washington County, at wherever DHCD monies go, that it can, this position can help to, again, funnel them into the right place as quickly as possible.
Okay. And then the last question, and again, I'm trying not to overthink it, but I know it mentions Main Street, and I know that through the sort of construct of Main Street as it has evolved and become a more solid and tangible thing for the city, will that communication with the consultant be centered toward city staff and its interconnection with the state, or more toward Main Street as a sort of quasi-created entity within the city? I guess I'd want to understand that, so that, because I think when folks get involved in a group like Main Street, they may have this thought, okay, now we're Main Street, now we have a consultant, now we're sort of a separately guided entity. I want to make sure that order of process is still clear, that it's still through the city and
Direct
not
to the city,
through Main Street
correct.
as a separate entity.
Direct to the city.
Okay.
Absolutely. Mr. Murray has, he worked on this at inception.
I don't think I've ever been in a meeting I didn't make a comment. I don't want to leave it with that.
Right.
That's starting to feel weird. But the Main Street Sustainable Community, et cetera, that's on the grant application, my understanding was that was simply a tool, because that's where the money
Right.
exists that allows for a technical assistance grant. And when you look at the TAG portion, the application that was provided, they specifically said, take the technical assistance grant. That's where the money is that can be used because it's a Main Street community, because it's a sustainable community designation,
Okay.
not because you're working on those components.
Right.
It's specifically the technical assistance grant. And when the secretary was here and was walking down Washington Street, he specifically was interested in not only the Hamilton Hotel, but Greg Strunk was along on that tour, and they were talking about, I believe, something you might even be discussing later this evening, about purchase of a property and how that ultimately could lead to upper floor student housing. And they were talking about other buildings there that might lead to student housing. Then they were talking about a building the Shoals had that at one point they had talked to USM about. And with all these projects, the secretary thought upper floor housing, which is one of his one of the things that he likes to focus on, lower floor retail, Hamilton Hotel, a substantial amount of money that originally, when you talk to DHCD and say, can you put this amount in the UIP that's downtown, you wouldn't expect that he would, especially on the deadlines that are typically in the applications. But in this case, DHCD is putting a substantial amount of money in, some out of his own pot of money that he has to use as the secretary, as personal, not personal, but personal funds from the secretary that he can provide, sort of like the Secretary of Transportation had done previously. So given the amount of money that is almost unprecedented that they want to provide and the additional projects that he sees that could be a major benefit, he thought that at that point, several days later, actually, he started making phone calls around saying, hey, I have this idea. And it certainly came out of his office, was all his idea. And he just sort of wanted to have a mechanism that you could have someone in the local community that would have more of a direct ombudsman, that he could then provide a mechanism to channel more of the funds so that he can see some of these projects come to fruition with funding sources once space commitments have been made. So that's where it came from. It certainly is no reflection whatsoever on the Main Street community process or any of those other processes. That was simply the way the grant's titled because that's where the technical assistance grant money resides. So it has nothing to do with those processes whatsoever. It's specifically for the ones that I just mentioned, and as the delegate said, that could then expand to other parts of the county and other things if he so chose, if he thought that was working well.
Yeah, I think the general premise that I get is the state clearly wants some more direct eyes on the plethora of things and opportunities that this community is talking about, and we simply happen to be the vehicle in which to accomplish that.
And it should be noted, it's eyes to look for areas where they can help more.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Right.
eyes, not oversight,
Yeah.
but to help more.
Right.
And that's exactly right.
And it's nothing that, hasn't been done or that they need more information on. It's just that he saw when he toured down here that so much is going on and the city's done so much that there's a lot of opportunity
You
there.
mean that we have potential?
That there is potential, yes.
Right.
And there's
Hear that.
potential for redevelopment. And I think he knows that the governor committed substantially to the downtown project in the urban center, and that he would like to be the next one in that could do that also.
He
And
must
that
not
then
read he must not read the local Facebook stuff. So. Well, thank you. Thanks for the explanation.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Anything else from anybody? Well, if not, we'll submit the grant, and then we'll have to, if awarded, then we'll have to vote to accept the grant. So, correct, Val?
I'm sorry.
Correct? You didn't hear what I said?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
all right. So we'll submit the grant, and if we receive the grant, then we would have to have a vote to accept the grant.
Well, normally you would do that beforehand, but I guess the technicalities of this grant are not really in place, so that's probably fine.
Does that sound like the right process to
It could
you
just be
guys, or-
mailed in, I imagine.
Yeah, right now, I believe the copy that everyone's seen was more of a draft, and as the delegate said, Secretary Holt was finishing a scope of work, how he actually wants to see it, progress, and then any other options there may be that the councilman had asked, that the secretary may be able to say, well, there are or not other options. But this was the draft version. It had the wording in that they wanted to see for specific criteria on the form that they had provided, just to sort of shortcut the process, because this wasn't during the normal application cycle. This was
Right.
more, here's what we want to do. We want to do it immediately. We know these projects are ongoing, and July 1st with the new fiscal year would be a good time to start, so.
Right, that wouldn't even be open anymore online for
Right.
staff to submit anything, so.
It would not, it was more of a
Right.
direct channel that he had
Okay,
requested.
all right, so just sign and submit and go.
Right, and it would actually, with that, it would go directly to Carol Gilbert.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Okay, we all good with this, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you
very
guys
much.
for coming.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is, where was that on the agenda? Okay, ASPE 1540 labor contract, some discussion. Scott Nicewarner and Carol Braun.
Thanks, Mayor. What we have before you is request from 1540 to meet with mayor and council, which is part of the ground rules. It's totally within the, is a appropriate request, especially when it concerns issues related to the ratification of the contract. Carol Braun's chief negotiator for ASME 1540. He's here, and I'd like to address the issue concerning the Me Too clause.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, first reason I'm here is the concern over the recent letter we received about terminating the contract either September 1 or July 1. It was a big concern, mainly because the union and the city began negotiations quite early this year. In my mind, and I think Mr. Neiswaner will agree, they went very smoothly. We understood that the mayor and council was concerned about the parity clause in the contract and worked through that in a way that I thought my membership would pass and that it would work on the city's behalf. We removed IBEW mainly because their pay scales are so much different than other pay scales where they don't have steps in it. And to be perfectly honest, we really watered down the parity clause where I felt that it added some protection for the local and also answered some of the concerns that Mr. Neiswaner and at the time Ms. Paulson had. I understand that the council didn't want any part of a Me Too clause, and at the one discussion in open session, I heard that loud and clear. But we negotiated a tentative agreement. I'm here tonight to urge the council to reconsider that tentative agreement. If there's concerns or questions, I'm here to answer them. But I think that was a very fair offer negotiated by 1540, by Mr. Neiswaner, by Ms. Paulson. And again, I'm urging you to reconsider. If you choose not to, I urge you not to terminate our contract. Let us sit back at the table. I've sent the mayor a letter in response and also made an offer as to getting rid of the parity clause. If you choose to go that route, I'd like you to take a look at that offer and then get back to the local as quickly as possible, because we've been sitting on this tentative agreement for close to 2 months at this point. And we're hoping, my hope and desire was that after my group ratified it, the council would ratify it, we all just be sitting and waiting for July 1.
Scott, what is your recommendation when it comes to the contract that you guys negotiated in good faith?
Well, and as always, I'll be totally honest with you. The proposal that we originally provided to 1540 was the elimination of the parity clause. We knew going into it that was a non-starter. We knew that the only way that parity clause was going to be completely removed from the contract was going to be if it was bought out, or there were other proposals made that at the time, and I think we can all agree on this, that at the time, financially was not going to be affordable. So what we did was worked with 1540 to try to address some of the specific issues we had. Ones that Carol mentioned, IBEW especially, being that they are on such a different pay scale than what the rest of the city is, and they're in a different fund. We addressed the fact that we needed flexibility when it came to negotiating with 3373 and 1605, because in Karen and I's first negotiations 3-4 years ago, we found that to be extremely inflexible, to be able to always have to have a 1540 Me Too clause hanging over our shoulder, trying to negotiate in areas where we were dealing with retention issues, we were dealing with recruitment issues, and all of that, knowing that 1540 could Me Too it if they so desired, if it didn't, you know, if it deviated at all from what they wanted. So we thought that what we came up with, and then with the addition of the binding interest arbitration, that a Me Too could not be invoked due to an award by an arbiter. That was something we had added because we didn't think of it then. I know Carol and the group didn't think of it then either, but now that that's been added in, I truly feel that with what was in the response to the letter, one including 1540 in the binding interest arbitration, I will honestly say I think that's craziness. Then the second part of it is to actually buy it out. I think it's just too expensive. I think that it's unnecessary because I think what we negotiated during this upcoming contract period is well within the means that will allow us to have the flexibility that we need to negotiate. We're not going to negotiate another contract between now and in 3 years until the wage reopeners come up. And at that time, we can see where we're at with the Me Too and adjust that accordingly. What I will tell you though is unfortunately where we're at with negotiations with IBEW, I believe and with 1605, this contract can't renew because the Me Too will be wide open at that point, and with 3373 as well, it's already been signed. Taking all those into consideration, and I felt this from the beginning. I think I said it in the executive session. I just really think at this point in time, we got the best deal that we are going to get. And terming the contract, if this would have been a situation where we would have brought to the table, no Me Too, the Me Too clause is gone. 1540 would have come back and said, well, that's not going to happen, and then given us a proposal that was just so expensive, then I would and not negotiate that clause at all with us. I wouldn't have a problem with terming the contract. However, what happened was there was good faith negotiation between the two of us. They did concede considerably on what what eventually became of the Me Too. We also provided some other benefits when it came to, excuse me, the wage enhancement that is being provided to them in the contract. A couple of the other, when it came to compensatory leave, I think, and there were some other provisions in there that we gave them. But all in all, I think the good faith negotiation in itself on this clause to get it to the point it is now does not merit the contract being termed. To make a long story short, I think we've got, with the inclusion of the binding interest arbitration piece in here, that they cannot meet to a binding interest arbitration award. I still think that's the best of the best that we're going to get.
Now, since it excludes IBEW, but includes 1605, 3373, and
MJ. Non-union.
All right. Where does that leave us with non-union personnel?
It would still leave us, I think even with what we would have tonight, it would still not be a Me Tooable situation. There's just not going to be a situation unless something changes, and if it changes, then good for everybody, where we are going to after these negotiations, we are going to offer any other bargaining unit such a compensation package, and this is just compensation, not benefits. The current Me Too includes benefits in it. They can Me Too benefits. This new language removes benefits. We're just talking wages. I don't see any situation where we are going to offer such a package to any other bargaining unit or MG that would be so far above what we would offer anybody else that there could be a Me Too. It's just not, I just don't see it happening that way. If it does, God bless us, then we're on the right path, and then everybody should get it.
Well, in 3 years, it could be the police though, right?
In 3 years, what?
3
I'm
years, we'll
sorry.
have a wage reopener with the police, right?
Yeah, it would be a wage reopener with police, but at that time, they're already on they're already on their new scale, which by this, it could not be Me Too'd. Really, all we're looking for at that point would be a COLA. And I don't see us, and we've never approached negotiations that I could see, even
The
before
only thing I would point out is that if I were sitting on the council with this and the police union and the wage reopener had good reason 3 years from now on showing us again what's happened with the police and that they're going to need an across-the-board raise, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd tell them to take it to arbitration.
they would have
I
that,
just-
they'd have that
and you
right,
take it to
absolutely.
arbitration, and that takes care of this Me Too clause. So that's how I would handle it, because that's the only group that I can see that we would have that issue with.
And what I would say to you in response, Councilman, would be, I just, based upon how we negotiated 3373's contract and with the pay scale that they've gotten, with the change in the work schedule they had, I just do not foresee an affordable situation that would produce a situation like what you're saying. I just don't see it.
If I could add something, prior to negotiating, starting in, I believe, October, Ms. Means met with all the bargaining units and requested that we all sit down at the beginning of negotiations just to talk about across-the-board COLA for everyone. That's what we were moving towards with this also, because we have indicated to her that we, as 1540, and I can speak for 3373, are willing to do that, because a COLA is a COLA. It's a cost of living. Your cost of living and my cost of living changes at the same rate. And we have already given our agreement, and I will assure you here tonight that we are still willing to do that, to sit down as a group for COLA and then break off into other negotiations when it deals with case-specific items to the contracts.
And I believe that was something that we all kind of talked about at one point in time, was coming to some sort of a master agreement, not necessarily on operational issues, but more on wages and benefits issues, to where it was spread, I don't want to say spread equally across the board, but it at least was, it at least was equitable across the board. And the concept that we've tried to get away from all these plateaus that happen over 5-6 years, that was one thing I know Carol, myself and Karen talked about, was trying to arrange these pay scales that took a little bit less of that hit away from us at certain times of a tenure period of an employee, and gave that iterative step that could be better budgeted. And I think that's, based upon what Carol said in our conversations, that's where we'd eventually like to get to. And that was all part of this negotiation as well, which ultimately would lead to the I don't want to say the inability to use the Me Too, but there'd be no reason to use a Me Too at that point.
You know, at the outset of what I believe Mayor and Council's discussion on the matter was removal of the language. And I think I can say with full disclosure, what I received when it came back was something that has roughly 3 times the language to explain something that I was under the impression we didn't want. And when we left our last conversation in public session, I didn't participate in the ones in closed session, what we got was further explanation, and I don't know whether this stuff's actually going to be written into the contract or not, but, and I just use this example, the one item I hit on, which the proposed language said, this section does not prevent the city from providing steps to any employee group as per the wage scale. And what I said at that meeting was, what it should probably say is this section does not apply when the city provides steps to any employee groups as per the wage scale.
And that was changed.
That was changed.
It was changed to read, ASME Local 1540 shall not prevent the city from providing steps to any employee group as per their wage scale through invocation of this section.
Councilman, if you want to change the wording to that we cannot meet two steps, that is perfectly fine. Our intent was that if it doesn't, if you don't change the intent, I don't care
Okay.
how you word it.
The concession was that it doesn't apply to IBEW any further, and IBEW wasn't in the binding arbitration process. The other is that it only applies to wages, but we recognize that we have a benefits commission that requires a certain number of votes for those changes. So it's
That's through the
fairly-
healthcare committee.
Yeah, it's fairly protected in that manner anyway. It also continues to speak to that, that it would only be invoked if the benefit affects all members and of a specific group. Well, that happens at pretty much every contract. And so I didn't feel how that applied.
Councilman, if I could just address that piece.
Okay.
When it affects all members, that would be the only time, and again, this is only the second time that I've participated in negotiations, but I can't remember a time where we have gone through and given a 3%, well, except we couldn't do it with IBEW, even though it should have been done, where we've given a 3% to one, a 2% to one, a 1% to another, a 2% to MG. That's what that addresses, that if we do a 1% COLA, it's going to be a citywide 1% COLA or a citywide 2% COLA. That I know that's what we were charged with. At least the first negotiation we went into was that we were given a budgetary amount, and that the goal was not to exceed that budgetary amount for those base wages plus the 33% or so for the FICA and the other stuff. Okay. But it would never be. That kind of addresses Councilman Metzner's point to where I just don't recall getting into a situation where we wanted to provide we gave somebody an additional COLA,
Right.
More than another person, because then really that's what the Me Too is supposed to protect historically.
And so, when I read sort of what it doesn't apply to, in each of, and I use the example of 3373 and 1605 here, that it discusses wages, but also discusses, I guess, all three: COLA, stipend, or bonus, and then it uses the term relatively equal. And I guess, in our discussions, we obviously recognize the complexities that we have as it relates to hiring and retaining, especially as it applies to the police force. If you didn't, if we weren't recognizing that, we would be under some false illusion. And so this would apply in all three of those items and in some form of relatively equal manner. Why does it apply to all three? Why does it retain that application to all three? And who determines what this new term relatively equal now means?
Basically what that means is that we couldn't set up a scenario where we go to police and say, we're going to give you a 1% raise, but you're each going to get $5,000. Okay? That would not be a relatively equal raise to a 2% COLA for everybody else.
And I guess that's part of my point, and I think it speaks to Councilmember Metzner's original question those meetings ago, is by retaining this, the mayor and council should be fully cognizant of the fact that you will have to keep those impacts in mind in those other negotiation processes.
Right.
And I,
And agreed. The one thing that this does not allow to happen, though, is in the case of especially the MG group, the non-union group, where there are many of us that would be at the top of step, that if an increase was given, that it was just a step increase, there are those of us that would not get an increase. Therefore, there might have been a situation where there'd be a step for those that are top of scale, you get $500, okay? The way the current Me Too is written, if 1540 would have gotten 1% across the board but no stipends, now they all get a stipend. This is what this new language eliminates, because it was not an across the board situation. Now, if that stipend turned into a $3,000 stipend or something that totally blew that per employee
Or a bonus.
increase out of the water, that would be, then that would certainly be something we would go into a negotiation. I'm sure the city administrator will look at when looking at the MG group and say, nah, we couldn't do that. But financially, again, looking at it financially, during this contract period, just don't see that situation occurring. Though Councilman, you are absolutely correct that going into a negotiation, you have to be extremely cognizant of what that per employee increase is going to be.
increasingly so with this additional complexity of language.
See, and I don't see the complexity, and I
mean,
don't
you're
see
adding
the
a term
complexity.
relatively in here, which is not defined by anyone, and
Right.
certainly arguable, should there be a disagreement over the matter.
Agreed.
And it applies, I understand your argument on COLA, I understand that. But when you add in, even maybe the stipend, but it's a stipend / bonus, I do think you need to be more fully aware of that then, when you are attempting to recognize your hiring capabilities and your retaining capabilities and all of those other groups that you deal with. And that's why, for me, I think it adds a level of complexity to a process that I had the impression we were trying to remove. I think it makes it even more so, and that's just me. And I will tell you the same thing, and I know you touched on it earlier, and just so folks hear it from my mouth, to their ears. I had no problem with if the group wanted to be included in binding arbitration, because I don't see politically counterparts, whether it be this or future administrations, going in an opposite course from that.
I don't disagree with you on that.
When we're talking about relatively, I think that's comparing, it's not, I know a lot of times it's tough to give non-management, they're behind us now, or non-union, I apologize. So if you give 1540 a 1% increase, and then you say, we're gonna give them a stipend, bonus, whatever you wanna put on, what word you wanna, it should be relatively equal to 1% of their salary is what we're saying. Is it gonna be 1.2% for some people, and it may be 80% for other people in non-union, but ultimately, the middle of the road is gonna be about a 1% for them.
Well, that's almost nearly a 0.5% difference, which, if I were in that position, I may find it hard not to argue.
But again, if I'm at step 13 and get a 1%, that's more money than somebody at a step 9, or less money than a step 15 gets.
just to reiterate, Scott, your recommendation would be to keep the original offer?
Would be the amended language. I think we
Yeah.
brought the second time, they included the binding, the inability to meet to the binding interest, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Then I'm comfortable with that. You're the one that's been in negotiations the whole time, so.
I guess the question that I have here is, first of all, thank you, Mr. Braun, for coming here and answering the questions, and Scott, all the work you've been doing. We've heard how there's really no plausible way that it could really impact us or anything, going forward, then why keep it?
I'll have to answer that because my members have asked me to keep it, okay? And it gives them the feel of a safety net. And if it isn't there, then you can turn around and give 7% over here and 1% here. It keeps everybody on an even playing field. I think I also negotiate for the 3373, and I find it tough. But we were able to come to an agreement at the table for 3373 and for 1540, where one can't meet to the other. It can be done.
I leave 1605, which is not settled at this time.
I don't control that.
I just like to point out the obvious.
I'm going to clarify one thing, and that is that the termination of the contract, it was either July 1 or September 30th, not September 1st. So,
Either way.
well, I would like to hear from Don and from Lou. I mean, if, and Scott explained it to me today, earlier, this morning, at great length, so. And just so you know, I'm fine with Scott's explanation of the original, of the amended language, and the Me Too clause.
And with, as Carol had said, we can change that last sentence to however, as long as the intent stays the same, which I think it does, we can change that to whatever fits.
Don?
Mayor, I can probably vote for it, but I gotta just tell everybody, every time these things come up, we get asked to trust. We settled with another union in writing, signed, sealed, and delivered, and their answer is, we're not gonna live up to it. So it doesn't really make much difference. Every time we go through this, we get told this, and every time we do it, we vote for it, and we get shafted in the end. So we'll live again and see how it goes.
I got a quick question on top of that. And you bring up a very good point, because I know we've had discussions in the past with some of the, I guess, historical impacts of the Me Too and things like that. And I don't expect anyone to have that information right now, but what has been the fiscal impact of the Me Too clause historically?
6 figures.
My understanding is we've used it one time, and that was since I started here, and that was 2, maybe 3 years ago.
But we've had other Me Too's, other than just your union.
That was not a Me.
See, I think that's what brings
The
up.
second one
I
was
would like
not
to
a
have
Me Too,
that
Mr. Metzger.
information
It was a
factual.
grievance based on wording of the contract.
We think.
That there was a disagreement, and we filed a grievance. It was not a Me Too. We won the grievance in arbitration, and I
Are we
also.
talking about the fire
was based on Me Too.
union? I'm talking about fire.
You're talking about the MOU, Simon.
I'm talking about the MOU that was signed by
This
fire.
is-
Oh,
Now, Paul wants to know what the fiscal impact
Well,
has been.
but the MOU that was signed by fire, if I'm correct, was that not as a result of a Me Too clause?
No.
That was,
No.
that was just a straight grievance. And what was the grievance about?
It was due to the rolling of the contract. So in their opinion, the contract rolled, we should have went straight to restore. And that's what we fought. So it did not have anything to do with
Okay.
that.
Don, what about you? What do you have to say?
I'm gonna take Scott's recommendation on this.
Paul, are you willing to accept Scott's recommendation on this with the amended language in the Me Too?
I'd still like to see that information as far as what the impact has been historically to the city. I mean, I don't, answer your question, no.
Wait, no?
I just don't see, I mean, again, back to, if all the other unions have, over time, we've gotten away from this, and this is the last one holding on, and we're being told here with assurances that, it's really not gonna come into play, it doesn't matter, then let's move forward.
Mr. Gordon, all the other unions received something very valuable for when they gave up the Me Too clause. And something was given for it. It wasn't just said, we're gonna terminate your contract and take it. If we tried to keep the cost very low, Scott had direction, and listen, when we sit at the negotiating table, we're not bluffing, we're not holding cards, we do straight talk to each other. We knew where he was coming from, we knew where, other than the Me Too clause, we tried to work with him. We tried to work with him with this. And again, the financial impact, we used the Me Too clause, I think, one time, is my understanding. I can't remember any other time in my 30 years being around the city that it was used. And unfortunately, I think it was used at a time when we were coming out of a lot of wage freezes, a lot of furlough days, a lot of frustration, and that's when it was used. I think.
It's been within, since I've been here, so it's
Yeah,
been
it was
within.
2 or 3 years ago. I don't remember the exact date. And with that, it's hard to say to members, we have to give it all up.
But
Take it
essentially, what we're
away.
being told
So
here.
let's water it down so the city can work with it, other unions can work with it, and go from there.
And if I heard correctly, the amount to buy that from this contract was 4%, 4%, 4%.
I don't think we ever made an actual offer on that.
But that was thrown around.
I threw it at you one day.
All right, well, we have 3 people who can move forward on the 1540 contract this evening and add that under new business. If that's the direction that you guys want to take, so this goes into effect and gets done by July 1.
Can I ask a question? Of the members of council that are in favor
Need a motion.
of adding this more complex language, if there are any members that would have a preference if the union were amenable to including them in the binding interest arbitration over the keeping of this language.
Six of one, half a dozen me, Kristen. I could do that. I don't know that either one is advantageous.
But it wasn't just that, though, correct?
There
They
was
were
a little more-
ands, in other words.
There were some other costs involved.
Right.
And again, I would encourage you to look at all of it. But get back to us very quickly. And I say that because,
Well, the very quickly we can get back to it is July 11th.
well, I think you could set our mind at ease one way or the other before then. But
I think you got 3 that are good to say at ease this evening on that direction. I'm just
That's what I think.
curious that if the other direction was plausible, and to say that it's equal on both sides, I disagree, and I only say that because That item applies at a specific point. But the first applies at a specific point in that process, and the other one will apply the entire duration of the contract.
Have you figured out the cost of that, though, along with the binding interest arbitration?
I guess it'll all depend on whether anything gets challenged at any point in that time.
Well, no, I mean, there's additional cost to that besides just the binding interest arbitration. Am I not correct? I mean, isn't there a percentage more or 2% more?
I sent you a letter, and I don't have it in front of me, but this is negotiations. If there's something the city would like to offer, along with the binding arbitration, or less than what I've asked, please get back to us. All I'm asking you is not to terminate our contract. That's my main purpose here tonight.
I would have to state, if you're asking for that, though, Carol, you have to agree to not meet to the current contract if we let it roll. Because otherwise, the only answer would be to terminate the contract.
I think the wording in the one letter, I said everything would be retroactive to July 1.
And we can't do retroactive, yeah, that's not something that we can consider.
The actual language is, dadgummit, I just had it.
I have the letter.
Additional 1% COLA on July 1st, 2017, and 2% additional COLA July 1st, 2018.
So approximately 65,000 plus
So we're
Benny's,
looking
probably
another-
about 72,000 each 1%, approximate.
Rolled for another year, so 200 grand, 250 grand.
Yeah, what's,
In totality by next July 1.
You got 3 votes, man.
Okay. Yeah, I think we just adopt the original contract with the amended language on the Me Too this evening.
okay, would you like us to take a short recess to be able to get you a motion from the original?
That'd be
Because I
fine.
don't think you have that in your, so
That'd be
at
fine.
whatever point you would like
Yeah,
to
we
do that,
can,
Mayor.
we can do that as soon as it's over, and we can just start our 7 o'clock meeting a couple minutes later.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna take a break then.
Scott, did we have that?
And this year's winner is check.
Good evening and welcome back. Okay, good evening and welcome back. Call this meeting to order, and I'm going to give the invocation, and we'll have the pledge of the flag. Could you please stand and join us? Dear Lord, we ask that you bestow your grace not only upon this council, but all of Hagerstown, Washington County, and the USA. Give us the ability to govern fairly, firmly, and without partiality. And we ask that you guide us not only today, but every day. And we ask this in your name. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, please be seated. So quick announcements. We're going to follow the rules of procedure adopted by this administration on December 20th. If you have a cell phone or electronic device, please put it on mute, like I'm trying to do. There we go. All correspondence and distribution to elected officials should be provided to the city clerk and should include a copy for the city clerk for inclusion in the official record. Our next scheduled meeting dates are: we will not meet on July 4th. Our next work sessions will be July 8th and July 18th. July 11th and July 18th at 4 p.m. and Tuesday, July 25th, a regular session at 7 p.m. We have some guests this evening, some exciting awards to hand out. We have the MVP of the Gridiron Championship. It's like kind of late in the year this time for some reason, but better late than never, huh? All right, so I need to get, first off, this was the 60th year of the city rivalry, and the series record is 30 wins for North High, 29 wins for South High, and 1 tie. Is that correct? Okay.
Sounds good to me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, there you go. The North High boy sitting up there, sitting beside a South High boy.
That's right.
All right. James Elshire, the principal, are you here? Nope, okay. Danny Cunningham's not here, I didn't see him. Greg Staines is here, though. Greg, could I have you come up? Could I get Michael Stevens, who is the North High MVP? And we're going to underneath. Okay, never mind. I got it. All right. Well, we have a the plaque that'll go to North High and has your name on it. Okay, and that's for you. You hang on to that. Okay. And then we have a scholarship check awarded to North Hagerstown High School, and you can deliver that. Tucky, you want to get a picture? You stand in the middle.
They always keep me in the back.
Good, good. All right. I saw the South High coach, Toby Peer, here. Could you please come up, Toby? And I need to get, is Ryan Myers here by any chance? Oh, he's the athletic director, and Jeremy Jacoby is the principal. Jeremy's not here. I take it easy. Okay. All right, great. Coach, it says here that are you 7-3? Yeah. You are? Oh, okay. All right, cool. All right. So I need to get Michael McCook and his parents. And his parents. All right, and we have the plaque to give the South High, and we have the scholarship for the South High. You guys want to come up and get a picture with your son? And we'll get one with this, and then I'll get the trophy. Coach, hop in here. He's scared. Don't go anywhere now, because the trophy, you get to take back to South High. Woo!
Come on, Coach.
So where's the game this year? Okay. The north? Right around the corner from me. Well,
It won't happen here.
I'll be there.
Come on in. Get in there, get in with that thing, I'm sure.
Whatever.
Steak this year? All right, next up on the agenda is citizen comments. Do we have anybody who signed up to speak this evening?
No one signed? No,
Everybody jump up at once.
no, sir.
No one? Does anybody wish to speak this evening? Okay. City administrator's comments, please.
Nothing additional, Mr. Mayor.
Fantastic. We're going to start with you, Mr. Elshire.
We are?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wasn't prepared at the moment, but I'll go ahead. Just a couple of comments. I left the meeting early, a little early last week. I had to get to a meeting in Myersville. Just a couple of comments in passing, and I think they're probably appropriate with the opening of the trail this week. The first is my best friend lives in Colorado now, and so he only gets home probably twice a year. And he was home about a month and a half ago, and he was remarking, as we were, I think we were in the heat of discussion at that time of folks, complaining of, trash and litter and things like that around town. He was remarking of how much cleaner he remembers things in this visit than in past visits. So, to me, it's all perspective. And then the other evening, we're driving home, and my wife said, why don't you ride by this painting that everyone's talking about? I want to see it. And so I drove by, and my 10-year-old said, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And my 3-year-old said, that's the most amazing thing ever. So art truly is in the eye of the beholder. But I think one of the things that I learned in some of the comments after the events this weekend was, where does it lead? Where does it go? Where does it end up? And one of the things that I hope we're able to do over the next year with the, Delegate Wilson being here tonight and the DHCD grant discussion and things like that, Snook and those guys that were here the other week on the Hager 5 project, is provide what I still believe is sort of that visual destination that hasn't been materialized at the end of the path, because I do think that we're not able at this point to really express the broader picture that I think that this body and the previous body and our governmental counterparts share of what that can become. And I think that the before and after pictures of just those pieces that we're able to see so far, they speak volumes above what we could say to folks that ask those questions. So I want to thank staff and everyone that have made that happen so far.
Paul?
The only thing I have this evening to add is, with the planning department, we have, one of our planners, Alex Rohrball, is leaving at the end of this week, and just wanted to thank him for all his commitment and his time to the city of Hagerstown. Obviously, I've only been on this body here for a short time, but he's been, very attentive and helpful with any questions I've had, not only, with the work on this body, but also with the planning commission. So I wanted to thank Alex for his contributions to the city and, wish him well in his future endeavors.
Skella?
I just wanted to thank everyone that came out to the opening of the cultural trail on Saturday. I think it was amazing to watch everyone's faces when they got there. They were all, leery of the project. I know there's been a lot of negative talk about it, but once you actually go see it, I think a lot of opinions were changed, so it was nice to see. And paddle boating on City Park was amazing. I think we need to look into having that all the time. That's all.
Mr. Metzler?
Everything was wonderful, and I concur with what's been said so far.
Don?
The cultural trail was exquisite, just as Emily said. And the municipal band on Sunday night was outstanding. The whole concert was outstanding, but they featured a clarinet solo, which was beyond belief good. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing, so we're going to move right along. We need to get a motion to adopt the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of minutes as presented for the mayor and city council meetings held on May 2, May 9, May 16, and May 23rd of 2017.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. The consent agenda.
Mayor, I hereby move that all the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Introduction of an ordinance to amend the city code adding nope, never mind. Under new business on A, we're going to table that.
Do you need a motion to table, or are we just?
Now we're just taking it off the agenda. Okay, introduction of an ordinance, land management code amendments.
Mr. Mayor, I would move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance to amend chapter 140 Land Management Code of the City Code. These amendments repeal Article 3 and 6 of the existing chapter 140 and replace them in total with new Articles 3 and 6, which are appended to the attached ordinance. The newly updated Land Management Code that includes these new Articles 3 and 6 shall be identified as the Land Management Code version 3.1.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of resolution, subscription and access agreement with the Commission on Accreditation for law enforcement agencies incorporated.
Mr. Mayor, I move for mayor and council approval of resolution authorizing the city to enter into a publication subscription and access agreement with the Commission on Accreditation for law enforcement agencies. These agreements are necessary to allow the Hagerstown Police Department to utilize CLADA's mandatory accreditation management software.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Community Development Block Grants, CDBG fiscal year 18 annual action plan. Jonathan has some addition. He'll speak first.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for adoption of
Hang on, we'll let Jonathan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just an update to the council. This has happened pretty quickly. We just received our final grant allocation amount, I believe, last Friday. Normally, we're February, March, April when we're receiving that number. So we did update the motion to reflect the new grant amount of $667,757 for our FY18 Community Development Block Grant. We had built into the action plan a contingency plan to use any additional funding, and it simply adds some funding to existing activities in the plan. With that said, we can always amend the plan in the future, but our current goal is to get the action plan approved so we can submit to HUD by July 1, and we can start incurring costs July 1.
So we got more money than we
We did
anticipated.
get more money. We got $92,000 more than we
And
had
all the
anticipated.
fear of Donald Trump cutting HUD funds, it didn't happen.
Didn't happen for this
Okay,
cycle.
all right.
We're a nonpartisan body, by the way.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, to get a motion?
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for the adoption of resolution adopting FY 2018 annual action plan for community development block grant program, authorizing the mayor to file an application for financial assistance with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the amount of $667,757 for the community development block grant program, and further authorizing the mayor to execute all other documents related to the city's community development block grant program for fiscal year 2018.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Approval of resolution, execution of commercial lease agreement with the State of Maryland Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation.
Mr. Mayor, I move for mayor and council to approve the attached resolution authorizing the execution of a commercial lease agreement with State of Maryland, Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, DLLR, for a portion of the property known as 2-6 North Potomac Street, Hagerstown, Maryland. The lease will be between the City of Hagerstown and DLLR and shall be in effect from August 1, 2017 to July 31st, 2022.
Second.
Discussion? I want to thank the Department of Community and Economic Development for your hard work on securing this renewed lease. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of Hagerstown 5 LLC development plan for sale property located at 4353 West Washington Street.
Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and council to approve the Hager 5 LLC development plan for the redevelopment of 4353 West Washington Street. Approval of the development plan is required by the purchase agreement for sale of the city-owned property located at 4353 West Washington Street to Hager 5 LLC for the sum of $150,000.
Second.
Discussion?
Just a comment, you know, there were a lot of people, a lot of citizens, including myself, that thought we were a little bit crazy when we moved some money around to buy this property a few years back. There's two obvious good things that come of it. One is we're not going to keep it on our books. We're not going to continue to own it for no reason. And the second is the good partners of Hager 5 LLC that have identified a very useful purpose for it and a significant level of investment that they'll do to make this an integral part of the trail.
Okay. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approve an exemption from City Code, Chapter 155, noise ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval and exemption from the City Code, Chapter 155 noise. This exemption is being granted in accordance with Section 155-5M to the city chaplain and pastor Zachary Camp for events to be held each Saturday from July 1, 2017 through November 11, 2017 at 227 East Washington Street, corner of East Washington Street and Cannon Avenue.
Second, Mayor.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of contract, Carl Bell Incorporated as a general contractor for the traveling and screen replacement project at R.C. Wilson WTP. The city project is CO863.
Mr. Mayor, I move from Mayor and City Council approve the contract for Carl Belt Inc. for the purchase and installation of the traveling screens and other improvements described in the advertisement for bids in the amount of $1,294,200. Funding for this project is a combination of MDE grant, MDE loan, and water fund CIP funds.
Second.
Discussion? Favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Workers' compensation insurance and fees for fiscal year 2018.
I think we're missing.
Okay, approval of utility right-of-way clearing the tree trimming contract for fiscal year 2018. Hate when they stick together.
Mr. Mayor, I move the Mayor and City Council approve the extension of the blanket tree trimming contract with All Reliable Services, Inc. for right-of-way clearing and arborist services in an estimated annual amount of $125,000 of the electric division funds, $38,000 of the public work funds for, Parks Department funds and $25,000 of the Public Works funds for FY18. This contract amount could be higher or lower based on actual quantity of work performed at the unit cost. The contract was competitively bid in FY16 and mutually agreed for extension in FY17.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Workers' compensation insurance and fees for fiscal year 2018.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council's approval of the following purchases as required by the Maryland Workers' Compensation Commission to administer the city's self-insured workers' compensation program. 3 purchases include the following: excess workers' comp liability insurance for $156,655, workers' compensation self-insurance TPA services $32,040, and workers' comp continuous security bond for $38,100.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of memorandum of understanding with the Washington County, okay, Health Department for Crisis Intervention Training.
Mr. Mayor, I move for mayor and council approval of the MOU with the Washington County Mental Health Authority for the purpose of reimbursing a law enforcement agency for overtime costs to allow officers to attend approved crisis intervention training.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of a non-union salary adjustment from July 3rd, 2017.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the approval of one-step adjustment from the step currently maintained as of June 30, 2017 for all regular full-time non-union employees who are eligible for step increase. Eligible criteria will include the following: full-time status met and maintained as of January 3, 2017 through July 3, 2017 must be full-time on any non-union unit pay scale. This base wage salary step-in adjustment has a total cost of approximately $254,000, which includes base pay and employer payroll-related costs across all funds, and is fully funded in the proposed FY18 budget.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Ask me 1540 labor contract approved.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval of collective bargaining agreement with amended parity clause between the city of Hagerstown and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Local 1540. This agreement shall run for a period of 5 years commencing on July 1, 2017 through June 30, 2022.
Second.
Discussion.
Just a clarification. This motion references, excuse me, amended language, and just to make sure I understand this correctly, I'm assuming it is referring to the amended language as included on the May 30, 2017 memo to mayor and council that says clarified proposed language. This provision will apply if the city, and it gives a number of items. And this provision will not apply, and it gives a list of items. And that it includes the clarified language that ASME Local 1540 shall not prevent the city from providing steps to any employee group as per their wage scale through invocation of this section.
It is meant to do that, the motion, in addition to incorporating the verbal agreement that was made tonight to clarify exactly what that language was. That was the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-2. And with that, folks, thank you for joining us. We're adjourned, and we'll see you on July the 11th.